Geometry, Unit 2, Lesson 2. I can find the measures of angles formed by two parallel lines cut by a transversal. Take a look. Transversal. These lines are not parallel. Let's look at corresponding angles. Look at angle 1. Now look at angle 5. They correspond. They're both in the upper left. Are these congruent? Are they the same measure? And no, you can see this one is smaller than this one. This one here is much bigger. So the question is, what would happen if we took these two lines right here, but we made them parallel? That's our goal for today. If they're parallel, what happens to all these angle pairs we learned yesterday? So I'm going to take this right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight all the obtuse angles. I know those are congruent because they're vertical. These might be congruent. These are congruent because they're vertical, and these look to me to be about the same. But for now, I'm just highlighting all of the congruent, obtuse angles, and here are the acute angles. Okay. And what we're going to do here is, I guess I can fill these in, doesn't really matter. We're going to cut these out and move them around and just do a little bit of experimenting, look for some examples to give us a pattern to see if we can come up with a conclusion here. What kind of reasoning is that? Inductive reasoning. So I'm going to take some scissors now and I'm going to cut these out. Okay? Before I do, I'm going to take the next piece of paper and I'm going to highlight the exact same thing. Alright, just going to go ahead and quickly put these here. On those there. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to kind of trim away some of the things around it first. Okay, so now I can cut this off a little bit, not that big a deal. Cut that off a little bit, not that big a deal. Now I'm going to cut straight down the transversal. I'm going to cut these in half. Okay, and I'm going to cut these in half. So I have all these angles here, and now I got to cut these guys in half as well. So there are two angles. Here are two more. So there we go, and you don't really need a lot of this extra stuff here, but this is okay. So let's take a look at these angles and try and move them around and see if there are any patterns we can see. So if I take a look here, I can put angle 1 in and angle 4. Okay, I can see that they're the same. You can switch up the spots and you can see, oh yeah, vertical angles are the same. It's kind of nice. But let's test this out. Once these are parallel, and the symbol for parallel happens to be this little arrow right here. If you have a single arrow and a single arrow like that, that means they're parallel. So let's take a look at angle 1. Is it the same thing as angle 5? You see how they correspond? Upper left, upper left. Let's slide it down. Sure looks to be the same. Okay. Well, let's look at some maybe alternate interior angles. Here's one here. What would happen if we look at 6? Let's see if 3 fits in there. Sure enough, it does. So now these alternate interior angles are congruent. So we saw a pair of corresponding angles congruent, and now these alternate interior angles are also congruent. What are some other relationships? Let's look for some alternate exterior. What's alternate exterior number 1? That's right, number 8. So we come down here and see if it fits. Sure seems to. So alternate exterior angles seem to be congruent. Alternate interior angles seem to be congruent. And corresponding angles seem to be congruent. What about the consecutive interior? Let's look at number 4, for example. Is that going to be congruent to number 6? And you can already look at it. Number 4 is obtuse, and if I classify number 6, it's definitely acute. So if I flip this around and try and fit it in there, it's not, no, that's not going to fit in there, not even close. So these are not congruent. But this is kind of one of the coolest parts. Let's take number 6 for a second. Okay, there's number 4, there's number 6, you see they fit. Okay, let's take them off down here for a moment. And look what happens if you rotate them around and you put them together. What do they make? And they make a straight angle. So, what's this called? A linear pair. They're adjacent, they form a straight angle, so supplementary and adjacent. So it turns out that the consecutive interior are supplementary. So consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So we looked at all 4 angle pairs, and 3 of them turn out to be congruent, and 1 of them turns out to be supplementary when the lines are parallel. That's the key. So if we go back and we think about our lines that are not parallel, you can clearly see this isn't going to work out. I mean, angle 1 and angle 5 are not the same. If I cut this out, it's not going to fit perfectly on that. Angle 3 and angle 6 won't fit perfectly as alternate interior. It's not going to work. So these relationships only happen when these lines are parallel. It's so important to know. You still call 1 and 5 corresponding in both situations, but they're only congruent when the lines are parallel. So my quick summary I already put there at the top for the sake of time. There we go. And I'm going to come down now and try and test out my ideas. For example, I'll have to stay zoomed out a little bit here because I'm going to refer to these numbers. Look at 1 and 2. Here's 1 and 2. What's the relationship? Are they congruent? No. Obtuse, acute. Are they supplementary? Yeah, because they're a linear pair. So our goal now is to try to fill in the rest. You can hit pause if you like and try it on your own. And now hit play. And here I go. 3 and 6, 3 and 6. See, those are alternate interior angles. And you should write it out full the whole time so you learn how to spell it. Alternate interior angles are 3 and 6. I like to try and cover up everything else just so I can see them. Oh yeah, 3 and 6. And on the interior, here's the inside. Here's the outside. So there are alternate interior angles, and we already talked about how they are congruent. 4 and 5. 4 and 5. Hey, they're also alternate interior, and they're also congruent. Okay, what about 3 and 5? 3 and 5. You should see those are consecutive interior. And consecutive interior for 3 and 5, we determined acute, obtuse. When we put them next to each other, they were supplementary. 4 and 7. 4 and 6, excuse me. 4 and 6, same thing. Supplementary. And now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put my ditto marks because they're consecutive interior again. 3 and 7. 3 and 7. Ah, if you draw your box, look how one is interior and one is exterior. That's the hint. This is in the lower left. This is in the lower left. If I shade, those are corresponding angles. Their positions correspond. They match. And those are congruent. And now, look at 2 and 6. 2 and 6, wait a minute. 2 and 6, those are also corresponding. And they're also congruent. And I have a last couple down here that are hard to see. 1 and 8. If I look up here, 1 and 8. Alternate exterior. And those are congruent. And finally, 2 and 7. Also alternate exterior. And those are congruent. I can try and trick you, and I can put some more down there. I can say, well, what about 1 and 4? Those are congruent because they are vertical angles. And actually, it doesn't matter if these are parallel or not. Because if you're looking within the same group, you know vertical angles are always congruent. And you know these will always be a linear pair, no matter what happens to the line down here. It could go like this, could go like this. These are always going to be a linear pair. But when you choose between here and here, you pick one of each. And when these are parallel, then all of these relationships happen, congruent and supplementary. Good luck.